most of what I'm going to be presenting here has come from my study of over 4,000 near-death experiences. As Jody talked about this morning, we actually have 3 separate websites. You invite any of you to get the business cards up there that have all 3 of them. But the URLs are NDERF.org, our Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, ADCRF, the After Death Communication Research Foundation.org. And then for all spiritual experiences that don't really fit into those 2 categories, we've got a separate website, OBERF.org, or Out of Body Experiences, and many other types of spiritual experiences. And I asked Jody just a short while ago, how many experiences have we gathered over the years from all 3 websites? And astonishingly, we're now over 12,000 experiences, including the near-death experiences studied, and I've had nearly 20 years to do this. I'm very serious, as I said in my prior talk. Those that have had the courage and taken their time to share these spiritual experiences with both of us have become the greatest teachers in our lives. We've had a lot of great teachers, both Jody is her profession as an attorney and me as a physician, but the people that are sharing these spiritual experiences have literally changed both of our lives in a very significant way. We're both very different people from where we were over 20 years ago, and I think that says a lot about the people who shared this and what we've been able to learn. And I hope we can impart some of that wisdom, some of that inspiration that Jody and I have taken 20 years to incorporate into our lives in the relatively brief time that we have here. Certainly, after 20 years of investigation, huge amount of interaction with the public and the media. I actually have to leave shortly after this for an interview that's going to be on cable TV soon. But we have a most extraordinary and interesting perspective from having interacted with that many people and shared these experiences with the world. So special thanks to Jody, our webmaster. There's absolutely no way I could do this alone. I started doing this alone nearly 20 years ago. It's become so busy. Jody said we have about 80,000 unique visitors, almost. It's actually about 130,000 unique visitors is the tally just on our NDE website alone. That's every month. And then the other 2 websites have, again, tens of thousands of people. So we're literally interacting with people around the world. So Jody, again, a huge thanks. You have literally made this talk and this outreach possible today. So let's give Jody a round of applause. And that she's literally, that is her full-time job. She's not practicing law because she so believes in what we're sharing with you here today, and it's important. So having said all that, doing all of this research is literally a lesson in humility. As I've said, those that have had near-death experiences and related experiences truly are our greatest teacher. But I think in an overview of what we're going to share today, as we start looking at some of the deeper, if you will, spirituals broadly defined messages in near-death experiences, I really believe this. This is actually a misquote of Buddha. This isn't really a quote, it's been a famous quote, but not really, probably not something that was directly said. However, I think it rings with great truth. And so I truly believe, don't believe in anything simply because you heard it. That includes for me. Do not believe in anything simply because it is spoken and rumored by many. Do not believe anything merely on the authority of your teachers and elders. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for many generations. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it. And I've tried to be guided by those principles. If I growing up as a physician in my medical practice, if I stuck with what my teachers told me and what so many believed, that all of our consciousness, who we are, everything we are, is in our brain, and when our brain dies at the end of our life, we're nothing. We cease to exist. If I had accepted that because so many people taught me and so many people believed it for so long and so emphatically, I would not have had the courage to do this kind of research, and we wouldn't be able to share what I'm sharing here today. So again, that's guided me throughout my life, and I think it's very important. Certainly, I want to emphasize, we're going to be talking about some of the research that I've done and where I think are some very important spiritual truths that are directly from near-death experiences. But again, I want to emphasize, the search for spiritual wisdom is very much a search in progress. I'm still learning, you're still learning. That's why I'm hoping we have a good question and answer period. We can all benefit from each other's wisdom and share as we talk about a search that is obviously so important to us, which is why we're all here. I certainly don't have it all figured out. That's a long-winded way of saying that. But having said all that, I've had a lot of good teachers for a lot of time. So I think near-death experiences provide some insights, and many people have different concepts of what the big questions are in humanity. And I think, at least from my perspective, we've addressed several of them in a prior talk that I gave, and if those of you have a chance to look at a video of it, we'll try to make it available. But when I talked about this issue and some of the material from near-death experience, my research I did, I think I addressed very explicitly, is there an afterlife? Yes, with 12 lines of evidence that I think are fairly bulletproof. I've never lost a debate when anyone's wanted to debate me. They're predominantly atheists. And I think that stands. Does God exist? Well, once again, my more recent research, again, derived from near-death experiences where people encountered or were aware of God during their NDE, and we're talking about 277, a very resounding yes. Again, details presented earlier. For those of you that didn't attend my talk, you'll have to take that. We certainly think made that point very succinctly. But as I was getting ready for this workshop, I said, well, what more is there? How can I really make this worth the while of folks that really want that sort of special information? What do I have? What can I offer? And so I asked myself, what wisdom in near-death experiences is directly relevant for living our earthly lives? Now, I've never had a near-death experience, and I feel a lot of my research is describing what someone else experienced. They went through this tunnel and they saw that light. And I think that's all very important. We've learned a huge amount of very important information about that. But as I was thinking about the wisdom of the near-death experience, I said, well, what about me, you, each and every person in this room? What can we find in the near-death experience research that would be, if you will, a nugget of truth, a nugget of information, inspiration, that can hopefully help make a difference in each and every life? And that's what we're going to focus on today here. I really believe that those big questions, which we may not ask ourselves them very often, but they're really among the most important questions that humankind can ask. And I'm certainly, as you'll see, convinced that there really are insights in near-death experiences, and I would emphasize related experiences, that address those. Interestingly enough, what I'm talking today is not what I'm hoping is true, not what I think is product of wishful thinking. This is based on evidence. I'm a man of science. I make life and death decisions daily in my medical practice based on evidence and reasoning. I almost can't think any other way. So what I'm presenting here today is based on a basic scientific tenet, and that is, what is real is consistently observed. I'm going to be sharing with you today, very consistent throughout NDEs, and I want to emphasize in those over 10,000 experiences, we see a very strong thread of this in non-near-death experience as well. All those related experiences, if you will, that spiritual umbrella of experiences. This is truly a convergence of science and spirituality, and of course I find that exciting as a scientist and someone who's very interested in spirituality. I guess I conceptualize, there's many definitions, but at least for me, I look at science as a quest toward understanding earthly reality. And spirituality perhaps is more of a quest towards understanding an ultimate reality. And to have that converge, to use the ability to have the best scientific methods to help understand that bigger picture, that greater reality, is exciting, and that's why I so love this research. And again, what is real is consistently observed. Oh, this is interesting. The Marilyn von Savant is stated to have one of the highest IQs of anybody living on the planet today, something over 200 as I understand. And her quote is, to acquire knowledge, one must study, but to acquire wisdom, one must observe. And that rings so true. People that have had near-death experiences, they observed. They didn't study in the book, they experienced it. It was literally an observation based on their own personal experience. And that is the foundation of the kind of wisdom that has been shared by so many people with Jody and I, and some nuggets of that wisdom that is my honor to share with you today. So, moving on. So again, we're going to be talking about, at least what I recognize what's important in the spiritual is certainly subject to interpretation. There's probably no two people in this room that have exactly the same idea about what's most important, but I thought that, what at least to me, and I hope to most people here, the insights that are most important are what we can think about in living our earthly lives that would make a difference. And I think, at least from my perspective, if you start thinking about the spiritual understandings that are embedded consistently in near-death experiences that really affect our understandings to who we are, I mean, we look in a mirror, we see our flesh and blood, we live every day, people interact with us in our earthly life. But as I've looked deeper into near-death experiences, I've found some deeper wisdom that really directly affects, defines who we are, and I think in a very remarkable way. This directly affects concepts of who we are as human beings and concepts of who we are in relation to other beings. And let's dive into that a little bit. So the big questions that we're going to explore today, and some of the information that I found in my near-death experience research, is we're going to focus on love, unity, and heaven. I think these are three of some of the most critical concepts that I've been able to come up that really define who we are, what we are, at perhaps a deeper level than we may have all considered. This was certainly revolutionary to me as I spent 20 years. I would have considered this inconceivable 20 years ago before I began my study. And yet here I am today after thousands of people shared with us, and I think this is important. Now, those of you that have read about near-death experiences, and I'm sure most of you have, and understand that, you probably are aware that perhaps the number one concept that is considered to be important in near-death experiences is love. The two most common words that people use in their narrative when they describe their near-death experience, and we've studied this, the two most common words are peace and love. Love, over and over you see in near-death experiences, is considered to be the most important thing, that which is everything, that which is, of all parts of the near-death experience, seems to be, probably, if you had to pick a number one most vital lesson, I would have to say it is the concept of love in near-death experiences. And for those of you that have had a near-death experience, you very, very probably know exactly what I'm talking about from personal experience. Well, let's talk a little bit about love and near-death experiences. In the most recent version of our survey that we have on our website, NDERF.org, I was fascinated by the concept of these spiritual concepts. And so we had a number of questions that directly addressed spiritual content, and were able to get more responses, as far as I know, than any other researcher has ever. Having a lot of responses is important. It makes you more confident than ever in these conclusions that we're getting. And I think when these conclusions are this significant, it helps to be as confident as possible. So one of the survey questions asked 596 of the near-death experiencers in our most recent survey version, very directly, during your experience, I emphasize that when I ask the question, bolding it. So in other words, I don't want them to respond, what did you think before your experience, what have you grown to think about after your experience, and focusing very directly on what happened during their near-death experience, the information from that source only brought back. So during your experience, did you encounter any specific information or awareness regarding love? Oh my gosh, look at that, 57.6% yes, uncertain 9, only about a third of them had a near-death experience that really did not come back with specific information. That 57.6% that said yes, that they encountered some concepts, awareness about the importance of love, is way higher than just about any other NDE element. It's higher than tunnels, life reviews, percentage of near-death experiencers that encounter deceased relatives, that have a boundary, pretty much anything else. So that is amazingly, as I crunch the numbers on this, this is a heretofore largely unexplored aspect of near-death experience that it seems to be very common, very important, and yet not a lot of research done on this. Now, there was a textbook box response that followed this question. So those answering the question were to put in the text box further information if they answered yes or uncertain, and they generally did. Now, this provided valuable insights into the information about love that the near-death experiencers were encountering. So it's from that text box and from that, if you will, drilling down on that very high percentage that encountered information about love, that I started to learning more about that. These are direct quotes from people that had near-death experiences from their actual experience. This, I think, more than I think anything else, more than what I could conceive of, helps to explain just how remarkable love is in near-death experiences. I knew that love was the greatest force around us, and that we are all love. And love is the only thing that is real. Over and over, you're going to see how unearthly love is. In near-death experience, love is nothing like we could possibly know in our earthly life. It's off the scale. Often they'll say words can't even describe the love that they had adequately, but over and over, near-death experiencers try, and I think we can get the flavor of that. Love was everywhere. It permeated the afterlife. It was incredible. Love is the root of all. It is the alpha and omega. You can see how near-death experiencers have struggled to find the phrases and the concepts to share what they knew that unearthly love. I was loved unconditionally, despite my faults and fears. I was loved and it was unconditional, very common concept. Unconditional love on the other side. Here on earth, love tends to so often be conditional. I love you, F you love me, F you like what I like, F you will do this action if you will believe this belief. That is absolutely not what I'm observing, and that's extremely consistent when people talk about love and near-death experiences. Whatever our faults, beliefs, shortcomings, who we are, what we are, everything we are loved on the other side unconditionally, and that's exciting. All of us in our earthly life have experienced conditional love. I almost have to think about it and maybe through guided meditation, let go of that attachment to the fact that in the other side, that's not what real love really is all about. It's not conditional. You know, it's not how many patients did I see in one day, what was our feedback score for patient satisfaction. We are loved. Oh, thank you. Here we go. We'll call this a loving act. This is a good example of love. Right? Thank you. Okay. This love I felt was unique. I felt completely safe that nothing could happen. I was no longer in pain, and my worries I had, fears, etc., were left behind in my body. And in caps, a love so great and peaceful, as though it enveloped my whole being. Felt love, an essential part of the whole entire experience. Was essential. Was one of unfathomable love. During my experience, everything was love. I was love. The whiteness was love. The feeling of flying was love. It was awesome. When I hear this idealized love, and that's exactly what that is on the other side, if you will, real love, I realize how hard it is for those of us on earth to manifest that kind of love. We're flesh and blood. We're far closer to animals than we are to spiritual beings. And yet, we're doing our best with what we have and where we're at in our earthly life. And I think that's an important thing. We're not perfect. We're never going to perfectly manifest love like is noted on the other side. But I think it's important for us to keep trying to understand how can we manifest compassion, reaching out to other people. We all have that capacity to, in some way, manifest love on our earthly life, even though it's not ideal. And we have the inspiration of knowing that ultimately, when we die, that is our destiny. Love beyond anything we could possibly know on earth. And again, these aren't just, to do these quotes was easy. I just literally would have to go down, experience, and share it sequentially. This is so deeply embedded in near-death experiences, so consistent, that there's no question the love that we have on the other side for all of us is off the scale. But here's a good example of Laura M. I love reading full-death experiences. There's, again, I simply can't put in words what near-death experiencers say. Laura M. was having an extremely blissful near-death experience, and it was God, did then remind me that the only thing I would get to bring back with me was love, the love I gave away. I was aware of tremendous energy and aliveness, and that everything was connected and alive and held together with love. I love this one here. I became aware of a flower, a magnificent flower. It was rather like a perfect Gerber daisy, growing in brilliant orange-hued colors. It was alive, and it loved me. Amazement. I turned again to him in wonderment and awe, exclaiming, "This flower loves me. I can feel it. Everything." He said, "Was made in love. Everything was made in love for you." Then I saw and felt all. It was me, and I was it. The firmament with colors alive and loving, stunning colors of light and water, each drop alive and loving. No word, no words. Now it was the time to return. But first, I had one more question. Why me? I asked. What made me so special that I was allowed to have this incredibly blissful NDE happen? God's answer, and this is important, nothing, he said. Love falls on everyone equally. Everyone is special. This was just something you needed to accomplish your chosen life mission. When I read this and shared this with other NDE researchers, not only did I find this inspirational, but all of a sudden, I suddenly realized this may explain why when you have a life-threatening event and you nearly die, only 10 to 20% of people have near-death experiences. 80 to 90% of people don't. And it's been a major source of research over the year. I co-authored a book chapter on this. We couldn't, In all the research over the decades that NDE research has been going on, none of us could figure out why some have NDEs and some don't. It didn't seem to be based on any demographic, age, gender, prior belief system, anything. But through the wisdom of the near-death experiencer who had the courage to share, I think we might have the answer. I think that some people need a near-death experience when they're nearly die, and maybe most people don't. But for this person who had this near-death experience, this was something they needed to accomplish their chosen life mission, and that's exciting. Maybe those experiences, those special spiritual events that happen to, I'm sure, most all of us in our life, may be beyond just important. It may literally be something we need to live our earthly life, and that's exciting. It makes me think even more about those special spiritual experiences that I've had in my life. This is really interesting too. As you can imagine, if you have a near-death experience, it changes you. They're called the after effects, and it can change you profoundly. These, again, is from the survey questions we had, and here's a list of people that said, we asked the question, before your experience, you were, and here were your choices, the 5 choices there. Greatly compassionate toward others, moderately, slightly, not compassionate, or unknown. And then at the current time, and understand these near-death experiences are shared an average of about 15 years later. So over that ensuing time period after their near-death experience, how did they change? Oh, I about fell out of my chair when I started becoming aware of these numbers. 23.3% of the people felt prior to their NDE they were greatly compassionate to others. Now it's up to, and it's hard to read, but it's 77.3%. An unbelievable increase in people that have had near-death experiences, compassion. Look at how their compassion level is at the current time. 77.3 greatly compassionate, nearly 20% moderately, and like less than 2 or 3% anything less than that. That really shows the power of love in the near-death experience, incorporating it into their life and making profound changes that I can assure you, as a physician, there's no other earthly event that I'm aware of or even can conceive of that would have that shift in a person's compassion towards other people in earthly life. Listen to those that have had near-death experiences and other spiritual transformative experience. These people are really changed by and large, and I think that makes their message for all of us, for the whole world, even that much more important. But that is an astounding change after a near-death experience to increase their compassion. So love in near-death experiences seems to be, if you will, the essence of everything. It says a lot about the afterlife. I mean, love literally is some people consider to be, almost a critical part of, a vital part of the afterlife. I think literally the afterlife with that level of love is literally our heritage, literally where we come from, and literally our destiny, where we're going to as eternal beings. And that's exciting. Does that not define who we are then? That's our destiny. That's our heritage, to be in that much love. I think that's exciting as I think about that and realize how important. Certainly it can be life and world changing. It changes those that have near-death experiences. It can change, I think, other people. Their stories sure changed me, and I think it can be literally world changing. This awareness of the importance of love in this world. Not as a philosophical concept, not as a hope, not as a dream, but strictly based on evidence, based on something consistently seen in near-death experiences. So I find that exciting. Now, this is interesting. So, curious on all this, I looked up love in the Webster Dictionary. And one of the major definitions is a warm attachment, enthusiasm, or devotion. So I got to thinking about that and said, well, wait a minute. An attachment, a connection, is that relevant for near-death experiences? Do we have some wisdom about love from that aspect? I think about that aspect of love being attachment as we explore the next part of those big pictures and some of the answers, that being unity. This was hard for me. If you look around your earthly life, aren't we separate? Aren't we different from everybody and everything throughout the world? Well, guess what? A very different perspective in near-death experiences. It literally took me years of overwhelmingly consistent messages about this unity we're about to get into in near-death experiences before I finally said, look, if I'm going to share and incorporate my beliefs about near-death experience, it has to be based on such, this evidence is so powerful, I have to accept that this is a part of the greater reality. What do I mean about unity? What's that all about? Well, let's talk about that. Encountering information about a universal connection or oneness during near-death experiences is common. Again, the latest version of our survey, where we ask these critical spiritual questions. During your experience, did you encounter any specific information or awareness that a mystical, universal connection or unity oneness either does or does not exist? I threw in that or does not because the skeptics would say it's a leading question and you're not really having the ability to say you've got information that a oneness connection doesn't exist. So by having a text box response after this, I can assure you that in reviewing the text box responses, essentially everybody that said yes is saying yes, they really did encounter information that universal connection or oneness really exists. That's tough, realizing the duality of who we are, what we are throughout our earthly life, and yet, look at the responses of near-death experiencers. Nearly half, out of a huge number, hundreds, saying they became aware of that unity, connection, or oneness. About 11% are unsure, and only about 42% are unsure. So once again, a whopping percentage of near-death experiences, very common, higher percentage than most any other element, are finding that mystical awareness, that wisdom from their own near-death experience about unity. Well, obviously, this has got my attention. What do they mean? What's that all about? And again, far better than me jawboning about unity, let's have the near-death experiencers that experience this say it in their own way and in their own words. That's exactly what we have here in these quotes. I was aware of a oneness, a connection with God and all the other souls, but also individuality. We are pieces of a greater whole, as I understand it, and getting back where we can all be together again is the ultimate going home. That's cool. I felt a universal connection or unity, but, this is interesting, it didn't really seem mystical at the time. It just felt like this is how it is. We call it mystical. On the other side, it's not mystical. It's reality and very obvious. Isn't that interesting? An undeniable feeling of universal love seems to thread through the universe. It was like I was a part of that. It seems like there is a deep connection between the other side and our earthly existence. And one thing was clear, we are all connected here too. Fascinating, even though we are not aware of it very easily. The feeling of being connected with the universe around me, a sense of belonging, awareness that a mystical or universal connection or unity, oneness does exist, and felt loved, an essential part of the whole. This was the easiest slide in the universe to do. I went to the narrative responses to that question about mystical unity, oneness, just started going down, copied and pasted. This is so deeply embedded in near-death experiences that it is amazing. There's no question that people on the other side, many near-death experiences, are very aware of that unity, that oneness connection. And I think that is, while it's difficult, certainly for me anyway, to conceptualize in this world of seeming apartness, I think that's part of who we are, what we are, and I think it's very important to think about, at least me, I hope you feel so too, in living our earthly lives. The fact that while we think we're, our nation and there's another nation, that there's our people and they're different and maybe they're wrong, no. We're all in this together. We're all one world, far more than I would have ever conceptualized before I started my NDE research. And finally, heaven. I hope as many of you as possible had a chance to hear John Burke talk about Imagine Heaven as one of the lead-off talks the other day. Absolutely amazing. Very important perspective, straight out of NDE, but I also want to talk a little bit about that because, again, as you think about what we are, who we are is a big question. What our destiny is, I think it's, some call it the unearthly realms. I think it's so magnificent and wonderful, please pardon my term of using it, heaven, certainly not a lot of other near-death experiencers say so. That is a busy slide. Wow, if anyone could read that, you've got better eyesight than I do. But suffice it to say, it's back to that question where we said, what did you believe about, this is again from the most recent version of the survey, over about 596 people responding, big study. So we asked them about the existence of an afterlife. And they had basically, before my experience, before your NDE, what did you believe? And at the current time, again, an average of 15 years later, once again, what was their shift about an afterlife? Well, for those prior to their near-death experience, only about 25%, 1 out of 4, thought an afterlife definitely existed. And oh my gosh, as you can imagine, at the current time, 86% say it either definitely exists and another 7.2% say an afterlife probably exists. virtually the great majority of people that have an NDE, not surprisingly, absolutely accept there is that life after death, that there is an existence after life. No surprise at all, they've experienced it. What surprises me is that less than 1% or 2 that don't believe in an afterlife that have an NDE. I don't know how to explain that, folks. But for virtually everyone, seeing is believing. If you go and you have a near-death experience and you see it and you're aware of that, you believe in an afterlife. And it's very good news. Well, again, getting back to the near-death experience, Don C. had this to say about his experience. Well, the end of that tunnel was the most peaceful place. It was beyond my imaginings, pure, serene, and loving. The landscape was beautiful, blue skies, rolling hills, flowers. All was full of light, as if lit from within itself and emitting light, not reflecting it. There was such beauty, beautiful beyond expression. There was also a bright city, or something like a city in the distance. The colors and structures of everything were beautiful, awesome. All around me, I could see and feel beautiful peace and tranquility with love and peace. As far as the eye could see to my left was a beautiful landscape of tulips and every color imaginable. To my right was a wall of beautiful blue that matched the sky. The sound of that music I cannot possibly describe with words because it simply cannot be heard with clarity in this world. The colors were out of this world, so deep, so luminous, so beautiful. You can see how people so often struggle to find words to describe this literally unearthly beauty. And just expanding on that again, straight from near-death experiencers, I saw beautiful gardens and places to rest. I had a complete sense of awe and beauty stamped upon my mind. The field of grass was absolutely beautiful. Turquoise is my favorite color now. The space where I was, it was like no place on earth, landscaping beautiful and new, full of happiness. It was a paradise, a beautiful forest. I felt the most beautiful feeling of love and belonging, and the very air emanated love and warmth, the love that goes deep into the soul and can withstand anything. And folks, I would submit, maybe you're luckier than I have, but what I've just described there isn't the life I've had. It is, again, startling to realize how unearthly, beautiful, and fantastic, and almost inconceivable this heaven is, what our destiny is in the afterlife. I consider that to be exciting. This is interesting too, just very briefly. In the afterlife, over and over we hear that essentially time does not exist. Over and over we hear that communication is non-physical, it seems to be non-spatial. Just sort of an FYI, I'll try to go through this quick. I know there's some that aren't real interested in math. However, if you start with the Einstein equation, E equals mc squared, that being energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, well, C, the speed of light has units of distance divided by time, so you just literally take that equation and solve it for t, for time, and you go down very straightforward derivation. But when you do that, down here, if you solve for time, you find that that equals distance divided by the square root of energy divided mass. Well, doesn't mean much, but what that really means is if you believe that that equation applies not only to Earth, but to all dimensions, perhaps even the heavenly dimension, then this direct derivation of E equals mc squared tells us that as E approaches as energy, becomes infinite, and I think we're seeing that in heavenly realms, folks, and M, mass or weight or just physical stuff, like we have on Earth, as that stuff we know on Earth, mass approaches zero, then time approaches zero, and that's exactly what we observe during near-death experiences. I think we may have a mathematical expression that, again, helps explain what's going on. It may be something that we already know in our earthly world that expanded to the heavenly realms, help explain in a non-physical, non-mass world. This could help explain why time literally does not exist in that realm, and that's just an interesting thing I thought I'd throw in there. So a little bit about that heavenly life. Yeah, believe me, time catches up with me in my earthly life. They go year by year, I get year by year older. But again, exciting to think that really as eternal beings, we are timeless. We are literally eternal, and that's exciting. So what can we say about all this? Well, I think what near-death experiences tell us about ourselves that is relevant to living our earthly life, absolutely love. This is what we really are, even if it's so hard to express and feel in our earthly life. No question from NDEs, we are profoundly loved completely for who we are, all that we are, and all that we will ever be. And that's exciting. I hope that can help. It certainly helped fortify me in the difficult times of my life, and I hope it can you. That's who we really are. Anita Morjani, famous near-death experiencer, is famous for saying, remember your magnificence. And I think that is absolutely true. That's who we really are, far more than we could have realized. That unity, well, we are a vital and valued part of the whole. We're connected with everything and everyone, including God. And that's exciting. That literally defines who we are. We are part of that greater whole, a very important, critical part. We are important, but beyond whatever we could have possibly imagined on earth. And certainly heaven, an afterlife, a wonderful afterlife, I believe, is our heritage and also our destiny. And I think that's exciting too, to know that that really helps define, help us think about, conceptualize what we all really are. Who we are, and every person on earth, are vastly precious, beloved, important, and connected. I find that exciting. Thank you very much.